The Gray Patrol moved through the rubble of downtown Boston with the casual arrogance of apex predators. Their powered armor hummed softly as they stepped over the remains of what had once been humanity's pride. 3 years of war had reduced most major cities to concrete graveyards, and the aliens treated each patrol like a victory lap. Jack Miller watched them through his binoculars from 2 blocks away, hidden in the shadows of a collapsed office building. His weathered face remained expressionless as he studied their formation. 6 of them today, moving in their standard triangle pattern, energy rifles held with the lazy confidence of troops who hadn't faced real resistance in months. "Look at these primitives," the alien voice crackled through Jack's salvaged communication interceptor. The Gray's translation machines rendered their chittering speech into flat, mechanical English. "They hide in their holes like rodents." "Better than yesterday's patrol," another answered. "At least we don't have to smell their corpses here." Jack's jaw tightened, but he maintained his steady breathing. 3 years of fighting had taught him patience. He'd been a Marine Corps sniper before the invasion, one of the best in the 3rd Battalion. Now he was something else, a ghost, a rumor, a trainer for what remained of the resistance. The Greys stopped at an intersection, their armor gleaming dully in the afternoon sun. One of them kicked aside a rusted human rifle, drawing laughs from his companions. "Such primitive weapons," the alien said. "Projectiles driven by chemical explosions. How did they ever achieve spaceflight?" "The scholars say they got lucky," another responded. "Random chance. Like giving a torch to an ant." Their laughter echoed off the ruins, a sound like grinding metal that set Jack's teeth on edge. He'd heard plenty of their mockery over the years. The Greys loved to belittle human technology, human warfare, human everything. Their own weapons were certainly impressive: plasma rifles that could melt through tank armor, personal shields that could stop most conventional rounds, targeting systems that made their shots almost perfect. Almost. Jack's hand unconsciously touched the rifle case strapped to his back. Inside was his answer to alien technology, a custom-built weapon that combined human precision with salvaged alien components. But it wasn't time to use it. Not yet. Today was for reconnaissance, for learning patrol patterns, for planning the operation that would remind the Greys why they should fear the dark. The patrol moved on, their heavy footsteps crunching through the debris. They didn't bother checking the buildings anymore. Their scanners could detect heat signatures and energy emissions from hundreds of meters away. But they couldn't detect everything. Jack had learned that the hard way, through bloody trial and error. He waited until they were out of sight before moving, each movement careful and deliberate. The rubble shifted slightly under his boots as he made his way back through the building's skeleton. His olive-drab clothing, covered in dust and strips of cloth, helped him blend with the urban destruction. "Eagle's Nest, this is Ghost," he whispered into his radio, using the lowest possible power setting. "Patrol confirmed. Same route as yesterday. 6 targets, standard loadout." "Copy, Ghost." The voice of Lisa, his spotter and radio operator, came back just as quietly. "Did you confirm the weak point?" "Affirmative. Their right flank scanner is miscalibrated. 15-degree blind spot when they turn north." He allowed himself a small smile. "They're getting sloppy. Overconfident. Good hunting tomorrow, then." Jack reached his exit point, a half-collapsed service tunnel that led to the Resistance's underground network. "We'll see. Tell Command I'm starting Phase 1. Have the others ready at dawn." He switched off his radio and began the long climb down into darkness. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, the Greys would learn that their technology wasn't perfect, that their superiority had gaps, that humans weren't just vermin hiding in the ruins. Tomorrow, they would learn to fear the sound of a single shot from a distant hill. But for now, Jack disappeared into the shadows, leaving only silence behind. Above ground, the alien patrol continued their rounds, laughing at human weakness, unaware that their time was running out. The war was about to change, one precisely placed round at a time. The resistance bunker hummed with quiet activity as Jack cleaned his rifle. The weapon was a masterpiece of human adaptation, a Barrett MRAD chassis modified with salvaged alien technology. The scope contained crystals from a gray targeting system, and the barrel was lined with heat-dispersing material stripped from their armor. But its heart remained purely human, the firing mechanism, the rifling, the fundamental physics of launching a projectile with precise, lethal force. "You're sure about the blind spot?" Lisa asked, studying the holographic map projected onto the planning table. Her fingers traced the patrol route they'd observed. Their sensors should cover that entire arc. Jack looked up from his work, hands steady as he reassembled the firing mechanism. "Should, but don't." They got overconfident, started skipping maintenance. "That patrol's been using the same equipment for at least 2 months without a proper refit." He stood and walked to the table, pointing to a specific building along the route. "Their right flank scanner glitches every time they pass this point. The local mineral deposits mess with their calibration. They probably don't even notice, their systems are too automated, too dependent on technology. And that's why they'll lose," came a gravelly voice from the doorway. Commander Roberts entered the room, his scarred face bearing witness to close encounters with gray weapons. They forgot the basics of warfare while relying on their toys. Jack nodded, returning to his rifle. 3 years fighting us, and they still haven't learned. Their armor's designed to stop energy weapons and high-velocity rounds. They assume anything powerful enough to penetrate must be detectable by their sensors. "But your rounds?" Lisa asked, though she already knew the answer. "Subsonic ammunition, custom-loaded." Jack held up one of the massive cartridges. "Wrapped in sensor-absorbing material salvaged from their own stealth drones. Slower than their systems are designed to detect, but at close range." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Commander Roberts studied the map. "Your shot will give away your position." "To their backup units, yes," Jack agreed. "But I'll be gone before they arrive. The sewers below the position are mapped and clear. And they'll be looking in the wrong place anyway, their sensors will tell them the shot came from much closer, because they can't conceive of our primitive weapons being effective at real distance." Lisa marked several points on the map. "I've positioned 4 teams to create distractions once the first shot is fired. They'll think they're facing a close-range ambush, not a precision strike from beyond their sensor range." Jack finished reassembling his rifle, each movement practiced and precise. The weapon represented hundreds of hours of testing, modification, and refinement. While other resistance fighters focused on stealing alien technology, he had worked on perfecting what humanity already had. "There's poetry in this," Commander Roberts mused. "They came here expecting to find savages with chemical-powered guns, and that's exactly what's going to kill them. They just didn't realize how good we'd gotten with those guns over the centuries." "Arrogance blinds them," Jack said, shouldering his rifle to check the balance. "They think evolution only moves in one direction, toward more advanced technology. They forgot that evolution is about adaptation, about finding what works and perfecting it." Lisa added another marker to the map. "This will only work once. They'll adapt after the first patrol goes down. Once is enough." Jack's voice carried quiet confidence. "Once we prove their armor can be penetrated, their sensors can be fooled, their superiority isn't absolute, everything changes. Other cells will learn, adapt, find their own ways to exploit the gaps in gray technology." "Assuming you make the shots," Commander Roberts said. It wasn't a challenge, just a statement of fact. Jack allowed himself a small smile. "Range is 2,100 meters. Crosswind estimated at 8 knots. Temperature stable, humidity within normal parameters." He could see the shot already, could feel the trigger under his finger. "I'll make it." The commander nodded once and turned to leave. Dawn patrol is in 6 hours. Get some rest. But Jack stayed, making final adjustments to his rifle, running through the calculations again and again in his head. Tomorrow would prove that humanity's primitive weapons still had their place in the galaxy. Tomorrow, the Greys would learn to fear the shadows again. The rifle gleamed dully under the bunker's lights, a bridge between two technologies, waiting for its moment to change the course of the war. Pre-dawn darkness shrouded the ruins of Boston as Jack moved through the underground tunnels. His boots made no sound on the concrete, years of practice evident in each careful step. The rifle case strapped to his back contained more than just a weapon, it carried humanity's hope for a new way to fight back. Ghost in position, Lisa's voice whispered through his earpiece. She was half a kilometer away, monitoring Grey communications and weather conditions. Patrol is on schedule. Weather holding stable. Jack emerged from a maintenance shaft into the hollow shell of what had once been a parking garage. The structure's partially collapsed state provided perfect concealment while maintaining clear lines of sight to his target zone. He'd spent weeks selecting this position, analyzing sight lines, wind patterns, and structural stability. Command confirms all teams are in position, Lisa reported. Diversion units ready on your signal. The sky was beginning to lighten, turning from black to deep blue. Jack unpacked his rifle with practiced efficiency, each component fitting together with satisfying clicks. The scope's hybrid technology powered up silently, its display combining human reticles with alien atmospheric data. Patrol entering Sector 7, Lisa's voice was professionally calm. 6 targets, standard formation. Right flank scanner showing same deterioration as yesterday. Jack settled into his firing position, the rifle's weight familiar and reassuring against his shoulder. Through the scope, he could see the intersection where the Greys would pause, just as they had every morning for the past week. Their predictability would be their downfall. Wind steady at 7 knots, he murmured, making minute adjustments to his scope. Temperature 16 degrees Celsius. Humidity 62%. Each factor was another variable in the complex equation of long-range shooting. The first hints of sunlight began to touch the tops of the ruined buildings. In the distance, Jack could hear the faint hum of Grey armor, they were right on schedule. His breathing slowed automatically, falling into the measured rhythm he'd learned decades ago in sniper school. They're approaching the mineral deposit zone, Lisa reported. Scanner interference confirmed, now. Through his scope, Jack watched the patrol enter the kill zone. Their arrogance was visible even at this distance, weapons held loosely, heads turning to chat with each other rather than scan their surroundings. They believed their technology made them invulnerable. Look at this mess, the Grey commander's translated voice crackled through the interceptor. 3 years and they still haven't cleared the roads. Primitive species can't even manage basic infrastructure. Maybe we should requisition some maintenance drones, another Grey suggested, kicking aside a piece of debris. The smell of decay is getting worse. Waste of resources, the commander replied. This sector's scheduled for demolition next month anyway. Full cleansing, new construction. Finally get rid of all these primitive human structures. Jack's finger rested lightly on the trigger, but he didn't move. Not yet. The patrol needed to reach the exact spot where their scanner blindness would be maximum. Years of combat experience had taught him the value of patience. Range 2,087 meters, he whispered. Wind holding steady. The patrol reached the intersection, pausing exactly where Jack knew they would. The commander raised an arm, gesturing as he spoke to his troops. Through the scope, Jack could see the weak point in their formation, the gap in scanner coverage that would allow his shot to reach them undetected. Ghost, all diversion teams report ready, Lisa's voice was barely a whisper now. Waiting on your shot. Jack took one final deep breath, letting it out slowly. The crosshairs settled on the commander's head, just below the helmet seal where the armor was thinnest. Years of training, months of preparation, and humanity's future all focused down to this single moment. Time to remind them, he whispered, why humans are still here. His finger tightened on the trigger. The trigger broke clean, the rifle's report barely more than a whisper thanks to its advanced suppressor. In the quarter-second it took the subsonic round to reach its target, the Grey commander continued his lazy gesture, utterly unaware of his impending death. The bullet struck precisely where Jack had aimed, the narrow gap between helmet and collar. There was no energy shield flare, no warning from defensive systems. The round simply punched through, designed to defeat their armor at its weakest point. The commander's sentence cut off mid-word as he crumpled to the ground. For one frozen moment, the other Greys stared at their fallen leader. Their sensors hadn't detected the shot. No warnings had triggered. Nothing in their combat training had prepared them for this impossibility. Multiple targets confused, Lisa whispered in Jack's ear. Their tactical network is in chaos. They can't locate the shot origin. Jack was already adjusting his aim, selecting his second target, the Grey carrying their heavy weapons. Through his scope, he could see them finally beginning to react, their movements sharp with panic. Impossible, one of them shouted, the translator making their fear sound almost mechanical. No projectile registered on approach. Sensors report no enemy contacts. The second shot broke the paralysis. The heavy weapons carrier went down, the round finding the same weak point in their armor. The remaining 4 Greys scattered, finally remembering their combat training, but their movement was panicked, uncoordinated. They're calling for reinforcements, Lisa reported, her voice tense with excitement. Backup units launching from 3 locations. Time to contact, 4 minutes. Jack remained perfectly still, controlling his breathing. Diversion teams, execute. Across the ruins of Boston, carefully placed charges detonated. Not close enough to threaten the Greys, but enough to confuse their sensors, to multiply their uncertainty. The aliens' heads snapped around, trying to track multiple threats. Energy signatures detected, one of them shouted. Distance, 300 meters, multiple directions. Primitive ambush tactics, another responded, voice shaking. They're trying to dash. The third shot ended his analysis. 3 down, 3 to go. Jack worked the bolt smoothly, inserting another round. The remaining Greys were moving more erratically now, making the shots harder, but their panic made them predictable in other ways. Scanning all frequencies, one of the survivors called. No targeting systems detected. How are they doing this? Fall back to dash, the 4th Grey never finished his order. Jack's 4th shot caught him mid-stride, the bullet threading through the same vulnerable spot their arrogance had left unprotected. The last 2 Greys abandoned any pretense of tactical movement. They ran, their powered armor carrying them at high speed toward the nearest defensive position. But their path was predictable, exactly as Jack had anticipated. Ghost, reinforcements 2 minutes out, Lisa warned. Time to move. Not yet. Jack tracked the 5th Grey through his scope, leading the target slightly. The alien's zigzag pattern was meant to defeat modern targeting systems, but Jack wasn't using one. He was using skills honed through decades of human warfare. The 5th shot connected. 1 target remained. The last Grey screamed something in their native language, too panicked for the translator to process. They dove behind a concrete barrier, finally showing proper tactical awareness. But Jack had expected this too. Ghost, you need to dash. One more, Jack interrupted, his voice deadly calm. He shifted his aim slightly left of the barrier. 3, 2, 1. The Grey broke cover exactly where Jack had predicted, trying to make a sprint for the next piece of cover. The 6th shot caught them perfectly, and the alien fell mid-stride. 6 targets eliminated, Jack reported, already breaking down his rifle. Diversion teams, maintain activity for 30 seconds, then scatter. The sound of gray aircraft could be heard in the distance, racing to respond to the attack. But by the time they arrived, they would find only bodies and questions. Questions about how their perfect sensors had failed them. Questions about how their superior armor had been defeated. Questions about how 6 of their soldiers had been killed by a weapon they had dismissed as primitive. "Ghost is moving," Jack whispered, sliding into the maintenance shaft. Behind him, the first rays of sunrise painted the scene of humanity's first major victory in 3 years of war. The gray command center buzzed with frantic activity. Holographic displays showed the attack scene from multiple angles as elite investigators examined every detail. Their most sophisticated sensors swept the area repeatedly, searching for clues about the weapon that had somehow defeated their defenses. "Impossible," the chief investigator muttered, manipulating a 3D reconstruction of the fallen patrol. 6 soldiers eliminated. No energy signatures detected. No targeting systems identified. No drone activity recorded. Through salvaged surveillance systems, Jack watched their confusion from the safety of the resistance bunker. Lisa stood beside him, monitoring their communications as the Greys struggled to understand what had happened. "They're bringing in their top military analysts," she reported, translating their encrypted transmissions. 3 transport ships just landed at their main base. "They're taking this seriously." Commander Roberts smiled grimly. "Good. Let them waste resources trying to solve the puzzle. Meanwhile, we're implementing the same strategy in 4 other sectors." The screens showed Grey troops establishing a perimeter around the attack site, their movements now far more cautious. They jumped at shadows, their sensors running at maximum power, burning through energy cells at an unsustainable rate. "Look at their formation," Jack pointed out. "Tighter grouping, overlapping fields of fire. They're expecting another close-range ambush. Which makes them perfect targets for our other snipers," Roberts nodded. "Your shot heard around the world, Jack. Every resistance cell is adapting your methods." The surveillance feed shifted to show a Grey commander addressing his troops. The translator rendered his words with mechanical precision. "These humans have discovered some new technology, some way to bypass our sensors. Maintain maximum alert status. Report any anomalies immediately." Lisa laughed softly. "New technology? They still can't believe they were beaten by basic physics and human skill." "Their arrogance blinds them," Jack said, checking the action on his rifle. "They'll waste time looking for non-existent energy signatures while we pick them apart with primitive ballistics." The screens showed more Grey reinforcements arriving, their movements betraying their nervousness. They'd doubled their patrol sizes, added aerial support, increased sensor coverage, all of which made them easier to track, easier to predict. "Second team reports ready," Lisa announced, checking her communications panel. "Target identified in Sector 7. Similar patrol pattern, similar scanner vulnerability." Jack nodded, but his eyes remained on the Grey investigation team. They were scanning the impact points on their fallen comrades' armor, still searching for evidence of advanced technology. Still unable to accept that simple lead and copper, driven by expanding gases, had defeated their superior protection. "They've ordered all patrols to maintain continuous scanner sweeps," Lisa reported. "Their power cells will be depleted within hours at this rate. And when they have to return to base to recharge." Roberts grinned. "The gaps in their coverage will be even larger." Jack shouldered his rifle, checking its weight one final time. Time to remind them that fear works both ways. "Lisa, tell second team I'm en route to their position. Let's show the Greys that the first attack wasn't a fluke." The screens showed Grey troops jumping at every shadow, their sensors straining to detect threats that their technology insisted couldn't exist. In their panic, they had forgotten the most basic lesson of warfare: sometimes the oldest weapons were the most effective. "They're calling for additional reinforcements," Lisa reported. "Pulling troops from other sectors to fortify this area." "Good," Jack said, heading for the door. "Let them bunch up. Let them waste resources. Every patrol they send is another chance to prove that humanity doesn't need energy weapons or force fields to fight back." Commander Roberts watched him go, then turned back to the screens showing the gray forces spreading themselves thin, creating more opportunities, more vulnerable patterns to exploit. 3 years they've laughed at us," he murmured. 3 years they've called us primitive. Now they're learning that sometimes, primitive works just fine." Above ground, the Greys continued their frantic search for advanced technology that didn't exist, while more human snipers moved into position, ready to remind the aliens why Earth had never been conquered before. 2 weeks after Jack's first successful operation, the mood in the Resistance bunker had transformed. The planning table now displayed a holographic map showing dozens of successful sniper attacks across the eastern seaboard. Each point of light represented a Grey patrol eliminated by human marksmen using Jack's techniques. "London just reported their first successful engagement," Lisa announced, adding another marker to the global map. "Former British Army sniper. 8 targets eliminated before they could even call for backup." Jack studied the pattern of victories spreading across the continents. "How are they responding?" "Exactly as predicted," Commander Roberts said, bringing up intercepted Grey communications. "They've doubled their patrol sizes, tripled their sensor power, and cut their patrol routes in half. They're burning through power cells faster than they can replace them." The command center's screens showed Grey troops moving through city ruins in tight formations, their every movement betraying their newfound fear of human snipers. Their once casual patrols had become nervous processions, with soldiers constantly scanning rooftops and windows. "Moscow Resistance reports the Greys are abandoning night operations entirely," Lisa added. "They're concentrating their forces during daylight hours, creating longer gaps in their coverage. Which our infiltration teams are exploiting," Roberts nodded. "We've recovered more alien technology in the past 2 weeks than in the previous 6 months." Jack cleaned his rifle as he listened, each movement precise and practiced. The weapon had become a symbol among Resistance fighters, proof that humanity's primitive technology could still strike fear into the hearts of their technologically superior enemies. "Their command structure is starting to fracture," Lisa reported, monitoring Grey communications. "Regional commanders are arguing over resource allocation. Some want to pull back to fortified positions, others want to flood the zones with troops. And every adjustment they make creates new opportunities," Jack said, reassembling his rifle. "Their tactics are all based on fighting enemies they can detect. They still haven't accepted that sometimes the old ways work best." The screens showed fresh footage from Paris, where another Grey patrol had fallen to precisely placed shots from a hidden sniper. Their superior armor, designed to stop energy weapons and high-velocity rounds, proved useless against subsonic bullets striking at exactly the right points. "They're starting to modify their armor," Roberts noted, showing detailed scans of new Grey equipment. "Trying to reinforce the weak points we've been exploiting. But it's making them slower, less maneuverable. And burning even more power," Lisa added. "Their enhanced shields are draining their cells twice as fast. They can't maintain combat patrols for more than a few hours now." Jack checked his rifle scope, making minute adjustments. "Have they figured out how we're beating their sensors?" "Not yet," Lisa smiled. "They're still looking for advanced technology, trying to detect non-existent energy signatures. The idea that we're using simple physics and skill doesn't fit their worldview." The command center's main screen showed a Grey commander addressing his troops, their translated words revealing their growing frustration. "These humans must have developed some new cloaking technology, some way to mask their weapon signatures. Maintain maximum sensor coverage at all times. Trust your equipment, it's superior to anything they possess." "Their greatest weakness," Roberts mused, watching the speech. They trust their technology more than their instincts. They've forgotten that warfare is about more than just superior equipment. Sydney team is in position, Lisa reported, checking her communications panel. Ready to begin their first operation using your methods. Jack shouldered his rifle, feeling its familiar weight. Tell them to wait for twilight. The Greys are still adjusting their patrol schedules, trying to predict our patterns. Time to show them that humans can adapt faster than their algorithms can calculate. The screens showed Grey forces across the globe, their movements increasingly cautious, their formations increasingly vulnerable to properly placed shots. Their invasion, built on technological superiority and dismissal of human capabilities, was being undone by the very weapons they had mocked. 3 more teams ready for training, Robert said. Your experience is in high demand, Jack. Good, Jack replied, heading for the door. The more they learn, the more the Greys will understand. Earth has teeth, and they've been sharp for a very long time. 1 month after Jack's first shot changed the war, he stood before a group of 20 resistance fighters in an underground training facility. The men and women before him came from different military backgrounds, former special forces, police sharpshooters, competitive marksmen, all ready to learn how to turn their skills against the Greys. Their technology isn't magic, Jack explained, holding up one of his custom rounds. It's just science they understand better than we do. But science follows rules, and rules can be exploited. The facility's screens showed live feeds from around the world. Grey patrols had become rare sights in most cities, their once dominant presence reduced to cautious probes and heavily guarded supply runs. Their arrogance had been replaced by a fear of shadows and high places. London base reporting complete Grey withdrawal from 3 sectors, Lisa's voice came over the intercom. They're consolidating their forces behind energy shields, abandoning patrol operations entirely. A quiet cheer went through the assembled fighters. Jack allowed himself a small smile before continuing his lesson. They still don't understand what's happening. Their commanders are calling it a strategic repositioning, rather than admitting they're afraid of our primitive weapons. The screens showed Grey transport ships lifting off from various cities, carrying troops and equipment to fortified positions. Their once mighty invasion force, which had laughed at human warfare, was pulling back in the face of precisely aimed lead and copper. We've confirmed 27 Grey bases abandoned in the past week, Commander Roberts reported, entering the training room. Their remaining forces are clustering around their main installations, trying to maintain a defensive screen that's burning through their power reserves. Jack nodded to his students. Show them your weapons. Each fighter raised a custom rifle, built to the specifications Jack had developed. Some were modified military weapons, others were hunting rifles adapted for war, but all incorporated the lessons learned from studying Grey technology. They thought their sensors could detect any threat, Jack continued. They forgot that sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective. A bullet traveling below their detection threshold, striking at just the right point, no energy signature to track, no shield flare to warn them. Beijing Resistance reports another successful operation, Lisa announced. 4 Grey heavy weapons platforms eliminated. No human casualties. The screens showed more Grey ships arriving, not to reinforce the invasion, but to evacuate non-essential personnel. Their confidence in total victory had been shattered by the one thing they hadn't expected, humans using human weapons to their full potential. Each of you will train others, Jack told his students. Share these techniques, adapt them, improve them. The Greys think they can wait us out behind their shields, but every time they venture out, we'll be waiting. Every patrol they send is another chance to prove that humanity doesn't need energy weapons to fight back. Commander Roberts stepped forward, his scarred face serious. We've intercepted communications from their high command. They're calling for a tactical reassessment of the Earth campaign. In simple terms, they're considering withdrawal. Another cheer went up, louder this time. Jack raised his hand for silence. Don't celebrate yet. They're still dangerous, still powerful. But they're learning what every would-be conqueror of Earth has learned: technology alone doesn't win wars. The screens showed more gray ships rising into the sky, their retreat disguised as repositioning but their fear evident in every movement. Their invasion, built on dismissal of human capabilities, was being undone by the very weapons they had mocked. Remember what they forgot, Jack told his students, raising his rifle. War isn't about who has the better technology. It's about who uses their weapons best. They laughed at our primitive guns, never understanding that 3,000 years of human warfare taught us exactly where to put each shot. In the skies above, more gray ships broke atmosphere, carrying with them the lesson that would spread through their empire: Earth was not to be underestimated. Its people might not have the most advanced weapons, but they had perfected the art of using what they had. And sometimes, that was more than enough to change the course of a war.